All right, let's dive in. Today, we're talking about something called exponential smoothing. It's a really powerful way to predict the future by looking at the past. Sounds cool, right? Let's get into it. I mean, think about that for a second. How can you possibly forecast something that hasn't even happened yet, using only data from yesterday? It kind of sounds like a magic trick, but it's not. It turns out the past leaves all these little clues, these patterns hidden in the numbers. And our job, well, it's to learn how to read them. So what's the big secret? At its core, exponential smoothing is just a really smart way of averaging things out. The main idea is simple. What happened last week is probably a much better clue for what's going to happen next week than what happened 5 years ago. So we give more importance, more weight, to the new stuff. This lets our forecast be grounded in history, but still react quickly to what's happening right now. Okay, so before we can start forecasting, we gotta learn how to see the shape of our data. Any set of data over time can be broken down into three key parts. First up, you've got the level. Think of this as the data's baseline, or its center of gravity. Then there's the trend. Is the data generally heading up, or is it going down? And finally, seasonality. You know, those predictable peaks and valleys, like a spike in ice cream sales every summer. Once you can spot these three things, you can pick the right tool for the job. All right, let's open our toolkit and grab our first tool. This is the most basic one, simple exponential smoothing. And like the name says, its main job is to find that stable baseline, that level we just talked about. So when do you actually use this thing? You pull this tool out when your data looks, well, pretty flat. Sure, it might jump around a little bit, but there's no clear upward or downward path, and there's no repeating yearly pattern. This tool is all about nailing that stable average. Let's look at a real-world example, 100 years of rainfall data from London. You can see that some years were way wetter and some were drier, but overall, the average just kinda hangs out around 25 inches. This is the perfect job for simple smoothing, data with a steady baseline, but a bit of random noise. So, how does the model figure this out? It uses a little dial called a smoothing parameter, or alpha. For this rainfall data, the model picked a really, really low alpha, just 0.024. A tiny number like that tells the model to be super cautious. It's basically saying, hey, don't overreact to one rainy year. Let's trust the long-term average. It smooths everything out to find that true baseline. And a result? You get this beautiful, smooth forecast line that perfectly captures the stable average. By using that tiny alpha value, the model successfully tunes out all the random noise from year to year and just locks onto that underlying 25-inch baseline. It found the signal hidden in the noise. But, what happens when the data isn't flat? What if it's clearly going somewhere? For that, we need to upgrade our toolkit. So let's meet our second tool, Holt's Exponential Smoothing. This one is built to handle trends. The difference here is pretty straightforward. Simple smoothing could only see a stable level, but Holt's method adds a second really powerful feature. It can also see a trend. So now we can forecast a baseline that is itself moving up or down over time. For our next data set, we've got a fun one, the diameter of women's skirt hems back in the day. As you can see, there is a very obvious trend. The hemlines get wider, and then they get narrower. A simple average just can't track something like this. We need a model that can follow the curve. Now check out the parameters the model chose. The alpha, for the level, is super high at 0.84, and beta, our new knob for the trend, is cranked all the way up to 1.00. What this means is the model is focusing almost entirely on the very latest data. And that makes total sense, right? Fashion changes in the blink of an eye. So to keep up, the model has to be incredibly responsive, constantly updating its idea of where the trend is and where it's headed. And the result is pretty cool. We get a forecast that actually follows the ups and downs of fashion. Because the model is so responsive, it can quickly change its direction, tracking the trend as it goes up, and then pivoting to follow it as it goes back down. That's the power of adding that trend component. So we've handled a stable level, and we've handled a moving trend. But what about those patterns that pop up over and over again like clockwork? For that, we need our final and most powerful tool, the Holt-Winters method. Yup, this is the whole shebang. Holt-Winters can model the level, it can track a trend, and it can capture those repeating seasonal patterns all at the same time. It's basically the Swiss Army knife of exponential smoothing. Our final data set is monthly sales from a souvenir shop. And just look at this. You can clearly see two things happening at once.
First, sales are generally going up year after year. That's our trend. But you also see these huge, predictable spikes every single year. That right there, my friends, is seasonality.
Now, when we look at the parameters the model chose, it tells a really interesting story. Alpha for the level is pretty moderate. Beta for the trend is at 0. That means the model found a very stable, consistent upward trend that didn't need a lot of tweaking. But look at gamma, our new parameter for seasonality. It's at a whopping 96%. A high gamma like this means the model is putting almost all its trust in the most recent seasonal pattern. It's basically saying the best way to predict this summer's peak is to look at what happened last summer. And the result is a model that absolutely nails it. It successfully predicts those big seasonal sales peaks every single year. By combining a stable trend with a super responsive seasonal part, the model can accurately forecast both when those specs will happen and how big they'll be. It's pretty amazing.
Okay, so we've just covered 3 really powerful tools, but the big question is, how do you know which one to use? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. You just let the data tell you what to do. This table lays it all out. Your first step, always, is just to look at your data. If it's basically flat with some random noise, simple smoothing is your friend. If you see a clear upward or downward slope, you're going to need Holtz to capture that trend. And if you see both a trend and a repeating pattern, like those holiday sales, then you bring out the big gun, the full Holt-Winters model. Let's just boil this all down to a simple 3-step rulebook. First, always plot your data and look at it. See if you can spot a level, a trend, or a seasonality. Second, use the simplest model that actually works. Don't throw a trend component in there if there's no trend to be found. And third, always check your results. A good forecast should just leave behind random noise. And that really gets to the heart of it. We're not trying to find a perfect crystal ball. We're looking for a good, solid model that captures the real patterns in the data so well that there's nothing left to predict. That's when you know you've done a good job. So here it is, your 4-step process. Plot your data, spot the patterns, pick the tool that matches, and then generate your forecast. It's a really clean, logical way to go from observation to prediction. So, we'll leave you with this thought. You now have a fundamental toolkit for looking at any kind of data that changes over time. Sales figures, website traffic, climate patterns, the clues are out there, just waiting to be found. So the only question left is, what are you going to forecast? Thanks for joining us.